Hello again, everyone. Edwin Learnard back once again. In this YouTube astrological segment, I'm going to be talking about the zodiac sign Gemini and their personality. And yes, this does apply and pertain to the sun, moon, and ascendant. Well, anyway, people, the first thing I look at as far as Gemini goes, they could be very talkative and loquacious. Now, Gemini is a sign, you look at them, and you have two Geminis talking in conversation with each other. You could often have them talking simultaneously or talking over each other. I think it's interesting. You have Rosie O'Donnell has a Gemini ascendant, Donald Trump has a Gemini sun. And if I'm not mistaken, they were engaged with a little war of words between each other for some time. This kind of epitomizes the way Geminis will often try to resolve their issues. It will be done often through a war of words as opposed to physical confrontation or resorting to fisticuffs. Now, another thing about Gemini is that they can assimilate ideas, concepts very quickly. And the thing about it is they may learn very fast, but sometimes they often learn superficially because Gemini can lack persistence with things, and that could be often connected with learning things as well. I mean, if they wanted to, they could, but Gemini just gets so bored and they're so restless. I think a lot of that has to do with it. They want to learn a little something, then they want to hurry up and go to another subject. Another thing about Gemini too is that they really could be very averse to stagnation, and whether it's mentally or physically. And Geminis often have a hard time sitting still. And many of you have heard of actor Danny Bonaduce. He has a Gemini ascendant, and from what I understand is that he could be pretty hyper and often has a hard time being stagnant or sitting still for any protracted period. Now, another thing about Gemini too is that they could be very mercurial and very vacillating. They really could have they might think one thing of something 1 minute and then change their mind the next. They might have one feeling about something and maybe enthusiastic 1 minute about doing something, then the next minute they may be like, well, no, I'm not really interested in it. They're more apathetic. It's just the way Gemini can be a lot. But Gemini often is very vivacious and really lively, and they can really liven up even the most drab or monotonous party because that's just how they are. They often very good conversationalists. Gemini could be very verbose and eloquent, and William F. Buckley had a Gemini ascendant, and he had a very good command of the English language. I think that'd be a vast understatement. And John F. Kennedy, the late president, had Gemini sun. He was very eloquent, very good speaker. And President Barack Obama has a Gemini moon, and he really speaks very eloquently, and he has very good diction and very good command of the English language. Now, another thing about Gemini is that they could be very dexterous and very handy. It's funny, I had a friend one time with Gemini rising, and somebody had asked him one time about his vehicle, well, why don't you just call a mechanic and get it done that way? And the Gemini rising person was just starting to smirk a little, about ready to laugh, because he worked on his own vehicles mainly, so I thought that was funny. Geminis can be very quick-witted. They have very quick responses to things. This same person that was telling about before, the Gemini ascendant, the friend I had, it was funny. I told you about this in another video, but some of you may not have seen it, so I'm going to talk about it again. It was one time when my grandmother's vehicle was starting to roll down the hill, and we were about the same distance from the car when this happened. And when it's almost at the immediate point when it started to roll down the hill, my friend was actually sprinted about 10-15 feet to the door. I guess he was going to try to open the door and put his foot on the brake. And the thing about it was, I mean, I wasn't even aware that was happening, but he had already gotten to that point. He was cognizant of it and aware of this, and did everything but stop the car from rolling. And I didn't even realize it until he was almost in the point where he was trying to open the door and put his foot brake. It just shows you how fast Gemini personalities think, how fast they think, and how fast they move. There's like no hesitation with them whatsoever. So Geminis are very quick-witted people. Their responses are very quick. And really, another thing about Gemini too that I've noticed is that they are very mentally and physically mobile. They're, as far as sitting still, that's something that's not in Gemini's DNA. Another thing about Gemini too is that they really have about them, they are very restless people, and they often they could be somewhat contradictory. They could go one way on something one minute and go the other way the next. I think a lot of that's attributed to, a lot of times Gemini will tell somebody something, I think because they don't want to hurt the person's feelings. It's not meant to be malicious, but they'll say something to somebody that it's really just to appease them at the time and pacify the person. And what happens is, like, say they're going to be somewhere at a certain time tomorrow, and they make the person happy. It almost gives them a false sense of security, though. And what happens is that they may not show up, and then Gemini don't realize, though, is that the person might be dejected over that. But it's not intended to be mean. And sometimes Geminis just get very distracted easily. A lot of times they have the intention of doing something for somebody at a certain point in time, but what happens is they get sidetracked, and they just then may forget about doing what they said they were going to do, what they said the day before, and then the next day they're on to something else because something else in their mind took precedence, and they did that instead. So a lot of it has to do with that. And Geminis too really are people that disdain monotony. They like variety in their life. They don't like things to become stagnant or boring. And if a Gemini has dissipated out of your life, sometimes it could be because things might have been kind of drab with your friendship or relationship you had with him or her or whatever. So that a lot of times it's because of that. And what's funny about Gemini too is being an air sign, they could be very unpredictable. They could drift away for a certain period of time, then all of a sudden, unexpectedly, they'll just pop out of the blue, like there was there was no tomorrow. They just, like, all of a sudden they're just there. Geminis could be like a will-o'-the-wisp. They could be hard to pin down figuratively or literally. I had a friend one time that was he had a couple people on him. I think my friend was almost pinned down with his back facing up and his face, basically against, facing ground. Gemini rising friend. This is a different Gemini rising friend I had. And what he did was, when the two people were on top of him trying to pin him down, he actually did some kind of push-up maneuver, and it knocked the two people off of him. So, I mean, not only did he basically outmaneuvered him, but in that move, but what that's symbolic of, and I think in a way, is that Gemini does not, it's very hard to pin him down, whether it's from a figurative or a literal standpoint. And Geminis too could be very whimsical and lighthearted. They don't generally take things too personally or much to heart, but keep in mind, in a solar or natal chart, the zodiac sign Cancer can often fall on the third house cusp, so they could be a little bit more sensitive than you may think. And if somebody, say, has a Gemini sun, in some instances their Mercury is going to be in Cancer, so their feelings, some Gemini's feelings can get hurt more than you think. And of course you have to look at the other elements in the chart and contraindicators, such as somebody may have a Gemini sun but say has a Pisces or Cancer ascendant. That person is going to take things harder and more seriously, more to heart than the typical Gemini sun, say, in that example. So, and Geminis too could be very tricky, and they use their ability to be that trickster to outmaneuver people sometimes, and entering some kind of wit and will contest with somebody that has a Gemini Sun, Moon, or Ascendant. About to say good luck on that one, because you'll probably need it. Gemini tends to be one step ahead of the competition. And the thing with Gemini too is that they're very inquisitive, and they often have a constant desire for information. Geminis are interesting this way. They often won't divulge a lot about themselves, I notice, but they will inquire a lot about other people and other things. And the thing too, another thing about Gemini too in their person, is that they have very, I was saying about quick responses before. I'll talk a little more about as far as verbally. Now, it's interesting. I'll give you an example. As many of you may know, I have a Gemini moon, and I think it may have come out with this in this situation. Somebody sent me an email one time on Facebook, and said something, I don't remember the exact words, but something to the effect, I'm running around all over the place trying to do 100 things at once. I'm starting to act like a Gemini moon. I think what she was doing, she was making a reference to me, because I have a moon Gemini, because I know her moon's not Gemini, but she had a Leo moon. So my response to her was, I said, I'm starting to, I think I'm going to boast about my achievements in order to fulfill my emotional needs. I'm starting to act like a Leo moon, making a reference to her having a Leo moon. So that's, Geminis usually have very good comebacks and are very witty. It's another thing that's really good about this zodiac sign. But anyway, people, that'll conclude this YouTube astrological segment for Gemini and their personality, and stay tuned next time where I'll be talking about the zodiac sign Cancer and their personality. Two things I want to get with you on before I head out. Firstly, the stars may impel but do not compel. And secondly, never isolate any single astrological element, aspect, planetary placement, position, configuration, influence, or what have you, and make an analysis of a person, astrologically speaking, based on this alone, because astrologically speaking, the person is the sum of all their components in their natal chart and not just one. Until next time, people, stay well.